You're listening to the Run for Your Lives podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And this is the Run for Your Lives podcast.
This episode, we are talking about Greenland, the 2020 American disaster film directed by Ric Roman Waugh and released in theaters internationally late summer 2020, and then here in the U.S. December 18th.
I know. Why are we always the last ones?
Yeah, I won't say anything about this year.
Yeah, I was looking forward to this one. I feel like a while back we had looked on IMDb and we're just kind of gauging what movies would be coming out soon so that we could plan ahead. And this one was on our radar right from the beginning because we felt like it really fit in the Run for Your Lives niche. And we were both really excited to talk about it. And so here we are.
Yay.
Ready to jump in. So we might as well get to it. I feel like, okay, so some behind the scenes information. Like usual, we like to dig a little deep and talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff. This movie was filmed in and around Atlanta, Georgia, including Conyers, Georgia, and Robins Air Base. The release date in the U.S. has been moved around all over the place, from June 12th to July 24th to September 25th, which is when we originally were planning hopefully to check it out.
Yeah.
Then, mysteriously, it was moved to video on demand for December 18th. So, we're both really excited to get a chance to finally break in and watch it.
Been waiting for this one.
Yeah. One of our friends actually got to see it ahead of time because she lives in New Zealand and let us know that it was pretty good. So, it kind of started building a bit of hype prior to us getting to see it. So the script was written by Chris Sparling, and he's known for Buried, which is a 2010 Ryan Reynolds film, and another horror film, 2012's ATM.
Did not see that one, but I did see Buried, and I really loved that one, so that's good info.
Yeah, I've heard some really good things about it. I did see ATM. It was quite interesting. It just took place in this one ATM booth, so...
Well, that Buried is... like 95% of that movie is just underground in a coffin with Ryan Reynolds. So yeah.
That, I'm seeing something that is, kind of a theme with that. And then he broke out and he did this huge disaster film about a comet.
Yeah.
So that's like flipping it on its head, I guess.
We went to lots of places in this movie, so.
Yes, we did. So the budget was about $35 million. And it has made up the budget. Of course, things are a little bit crazy now with COVID, and getting to the theater is not something that you can do quite so easily anymore. A lot of theaters are either closed or you have to really plan ahead to go. And so it's just a bit of a difficult process. Mm-hmm. So I haven't figured out like how you really gauge a box office success during the time of COVID.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we're definitely going to have to figure out at some point, or someone will figure it out for us and we can just report on it. So this film was 119 minutes, and I think we're ready for Pake to give us the synopsis.
All right.
Of Greenland.
Quick synopsis here. A family struggles for survival in the face of a cataclysmic natural disaster in the form of a, quote, planet-killing comet.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of a few other movies, like combined, like parts of different films.
Yeah.
But I really appreciated the seriousness and the intensity throughout the whole film. Absolutely. I didn't feel like it let up at all.
No, not in the slightest.
No, it didn't. I felt so connected, despite the fact that we really didn't have a lot of a backstory on the family at all.
Yeah.
We knew that he was an architect. We knew that he was coming back home and it looked like he and his wife had been estranged. We knew his son had type 1 diabetes. There really wasn't a lot of information, but I felt like we had enough to kind of connect with them.
Yeah.
And it did remind me of a few of the Comet/Asteroid films of the late 1990s. But I feel like the story in this one was more subtle. And the effects really weren't overdone. I felt like the effects were, to me, perfect for what they were trying to tell in the story. And there were a few points in the film that reminded me of an 80s film called The Day After, and of 2012, which was a John Cusack film that came out, I think, 10 years ago now. So, yeah, those are my initial thoughts on Greenland.
Cool. Man, my initial thoughts that I have are just, again, I'm very reactive person, so you're not going to get negative initial thoughts from me most of the time, because that's really what mine are. It's just, wow, like chills. Because I really did, when the credits hit, I was like, goosebumps. It's like, okay, wow. Because I was just like, I really loved it. And again, like the things that you mentioned, the tension was just so high constantly, to where like there's points where I was like, I don't know if I can handle this. Like I watch a lot of intense movies and like horror and things like that. But for some reason, there's something about this movie that just, that tension just kept pushing. I was like, I'm glad that I paused this pretty regularly to take my notes and stuff, because this is a lot to take in. Like, I was like, these people can't catch a break ever. Like,
No, they could not.
It was rough. And like the emotional stuff between the characters, like you said, was just, even though we didn't know a whole lot going in, it was just incredible. You really felt things. I got emotional. There were some tears shed at many points during this movie. I was just whether it's joy or like the tension or just like, I was like, oh man, it was spectacular. I think it was very effective in all the ways that it needed to be.
I have to agree with that. I felt like I was on the edge of my seat at times. And I also, though, felt very subdued. Like, it was so serious. And sitting there watching it, it was like I was going to stop breathing, because I was so focused on what was happening in the film and the characters. And usually in a movie like this, when they don't give me enough of a backstory, I have trouble connecting. It didn't have any trouble connecting to this family at all.
Yeah.
I just, they showed us their neighborhood and their neighbors, and there were just so many moments that happened throughout the film that you could envision yourself in.
Yeah.
And you just felt like this my heart at the end, my heart hurt in this movie. Yeah. It was a roller coaster of emotion. Like you said, tears of happiness and then tears of sadness, and just questioning things and just wondering, how would you react in a situation like that? And you'd like to hope that you would try to help other people, but I feel like it also showed how people react to things.
Yeah.
And it just, there were so many boxes that I ticked during this. And at the end of it, my fiance actually just looked at me and said, this was definitely a you movie. Because he knows me so well, and he knows that this is the type of film that I just gravitate toward. And I'm just so excited that we finally got a chance to see it and can talk about it.
Yeah, I like what you said about, edge of your seat, or like, because it was like there's two modes. I was either edge of my seat, just like so sucked into what's going on, or I was like leaning back and I'm trying to say this in a way I can describe it to an audio audience versus just a visual. But like I'm sitting there just like holding my head, like in just that tension, being like, oh my God, how are they going to get out of this? Like just that, like I'm all the way back in my chair, just like not covering my eyes, but like just holding the sides of my head. Like, I don't know what this is going to have, whether it was a tense moment or just something that was like so tragic and heartbreaking, and you felt for different people around them. And you're like, I wish I could do something as a viewer, like on the outside, like there's nothing I can do. I just have to watch this play out, and it's horrifying.
Yeah, there were times for me that it was not hard to watch, but just hard to digest, I guess. Seeing certain scenes and just watching things unfold. And you do start to question, when is something going to go right for them? But also, I felt like things were somewhat realistic.
Yeah.
Like some of the things that happened, I could envision happening during something like this. And so I didn't have a lot of suspension of disbelief moments. It was mostly, oh my God, this family is just, they were already suffering from being disconnected, and then he was moving back into the home. And then as the movie continued to unfold, you watched a family that had been fragmented kind of come back together, quite literally, but also with like their emotions and their connection to each other.
Yeah. Man, so good. Well, I think it's about time then. We might as well jump into this movie in the specifics, talk about the characters, talk about the plot, talk about the things we like to do.
All right, that sounds good to me.
And I think we found a really good just kind of wave to ride as far as breaking down characters and stuff. I think that's a really cool way we've done this. So I think that's kind of the format of this podcast. Now we found it. And I like that.
We always like to talk about the characters.
Yeah, so let's jump in. Let's do that. Let's start with the characters.
All right.
Of course, it makes sense to start with kind of the main lead role, Gerard Butler's John Allen Garrity. So,
yeah. I didn't know quite what to make of him at first. I mean, he was this architect, estranged from his wife. He's going home. Looks like he's moving back in. I mean, you really didn't get a lot from the dialogue. It was mostly from watching him and his mannerisms that you were figuring out who he is a little bit. And I remember sitting back at one point thinking, oh yeah, this is the suburban life. He's got his neighbors. They're going to have a barbecue. You know, this is the way that it goes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I related to that a bit. And then I tried to put myself in his shoes where he gets this text message saying, or his phone, he gets a text message, then his phone rings. And he finds out that he's been pre-selected for something, but there's really no idea what it is. Like, he doesn't understand what's happening, so he seemed very, very confused. And then later on, when they're all at the barbecue and the first fragment hit, and he's seeing the TV showing their names and that they've been pre-selected right in front of all of his friends.
Yeah.
And he's not sure really what it even means, and his friends are all very upset, obviously, because they did not get a call. So they all leave and go home. And I tried to just imagine what it would be like when you have people. For me, friends are the family you pick for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you have your family because that's your blood family, but friends are the family you pick for yourself.
Definitely.
And they mean a lot to you. They can mean as much as family in some cases. And so I tried to imagine what it would be like if I was in his shoes and I was having to leave my friends, not knowing where I was going, what was going to happen, if I was even going to survive, and how to advise my friends. What on earth, you know, what do you say?
Yeah.
It's so confusing. You know, you're confused as it is and you don't know what on earth to tell them, and they want to know, well, tell me where can I go to be safe? And you don't even know the answer to the question because they've given you no info other than this message to report to Robins Air Force Base, Robins Air Force Base. And I think that was really, you know, it had to have been difficult to watch. And I mean, it had to be difficult to experience. I can't imagine.
Yeah. John is pressed this whole movie through so many different moral, ambiguous, like, issues and, like, problems to face. But it's another, you know, it's been a theme sometimes on this podcast of, like, you wouldn't know what to do unless you're in that situation, like you mentioned. And so it's tough. But I think they did a really good job at setting him up as being a good guy. Like, of course, we get the reveal that, he cheated on his wife and that was his choice. And that's a line he crossed. But also you get, you know, he's got these things where, he has to leave his, like, neighbors and friends behind. He has to kill somebody. He has to do all these things. But also, like, he makes sure to go out of his way to save people at different points. And I think one of the biggest things I loved was, again, you see, the separation from his wife. And he's having that first conversation you see on screen of him and his son, Nathan. To where, you know, he's playing with him and he's talking about the drawing stuff. Picks him up, puts him on the bed, and he's laying there next to him. And you see that Nathan's worried that, you know, is mom going to make you leave again? And am I going to see you? And he's afraid of his father being gone and out of his life. And he very straightforward tells Nathan, you know, he promises him, I will always be your father and I'll always be there for you. And I think they really wanted to set up that, like, he is a caring individual who is going to do what he can for his family and for other people, as we see. So Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel, too, he wasn't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't set him up to be like the superhero. He wasn't Superman.
Yeah.
They set him up to be a realistic person, someone who had made mistakes and was trying to own up to them and be a good father and also repair the relationship with his wife.
Yeah.
And I think that that was apparent throughout the movie. I mean, he carried the insulin cartridges for his son's pump. He carried those the entire way.
Yeah.
Until they were reunited, because it was so important to him that he knew that his son needed them. There was no question.
Mm-hmm.
He just kept them the entire time.
He ran back to the car to get them, because I'm thinking like, there is absolutely no way you're going to make it back to that car through this sea of angry people in 15 to 20 minutes. He did, but that's already after then that his, wife and son had already been removed from the line and all this other stuff. And just, it's this kind of lucky break of getting off the plane at just the right time, and it's just a lot of
getting
high
other
intensity.
people off. I mean, he couldn't save everyone, but he did yell at others to get off the plane because he saw what was unfolding. Yeah. And it was really, luck that he was able to get off the plane, because it was another person that was there that said, well, my sister's child was turned away because of it. And then he starts to realize, oh, okay, that might have happened in this case. I better get off this plane.
Yeah. It's a lot of just, he's having to make these split decisions, these last second choices based on the information he gets at any certain time. And so he's sitting there texting his wife. He's texting Allison, are you on the plane? He's getting nothing. He was just going to fly away on that plane and hope that he found them where they ended up. But then it was that little thing where he's like, oh, then that same thing must have happened to them. And I'm going to put them over me, and I'm getting off of this plane. Yeah.
He was faced, it was like he was in a never-ending flowchart.
Yeah.
Where he was just getting asked, okay, you're here, so do you go left or right? And then you go right, and do you go left or right again? Or up or down? I mean, he was just constantly faced with these choices that were incredible and at times heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
And he continued to grow throughout. I mean, you could tell that he was still evolving at that time.
Yeah. I put myself in his mindset, which adds to the tension I mentioned of watching this. Because I'm like, trying to like put myself in like, what does he know and what does he not know? To where there was literally a huge like wave of relief for me, even personally, when he finally gets back to their car and sees the note that Allison had left him. And I was like, okay, like at least he knows where they're headed now. And like, he's not just completely in the dark, like, because I felt that tension for him and that like nervousness. And so it was nice to see him have some kind of goal.
I was glad that they didn't just rely on technology, that she actually left that note, because you can imagine that technology might be failing at a time like this, because everyone's going to be on their phones trying to reach whoever, loved ones. And so it was just really interesting, to see them use, a note. I was happy to see that.
Yeah.
Because you can't always count on technology. Sometimes you've got to get a pen out, you got to get a piece of paper, you got to write a note the old-fashioned way.
Yeah. I think some people could write this movie off as a lot of, the Deus Ex Machina kind of stuff, or, there's just so many coincidences that help them get to the final goal. But, it's a movie, so you have to expect, you go into this kind of, I was like, I get really tense and I have to remind myself, is like, it's a movie and they're all going to be fine in the end, or at least they're all going to die together. If it's going to be that kind of ending, I don't know. But it's like, but at least like things are going to work out for the best, because it's got to be an entertaining movie. So you can't just not have things working out all the time. And so I like that at least they can sprinkle them in creative and believable ways. He
needed that.
Yeah. He winds up in this truck going to Canada with all these people. And through there, you get the exposition of, oh, there's this air base, this airport in Canada where they're taking people to Greenland because those pilots have been tracking military flights. And that seems to be where they're all headed. So it's a shot in the dark, but it's a better shot than nothing.
Yeah, that's where he met Colin.
Yes, I love Colin. For the short little bit he was there.
He had his own story. He had his own, issues with his family. And he told them, you have to go to Osgood because there are planes that are taking people. It's not like pre-selected. They're just going to take people there and hope for the best. At least you've got to try.
Yep.
And I guess his mom had been selected, but he had been estranged from his mother, so evidently he was not included in the group to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really liked Colin. I felt like Colin was going to be a character that might help him or go with him, and then that, unfortunately, Colin didn't last very long.
No, which just broke my heart. I hated that because...
Yeah, me too.
Man, it's Josh Michael. Our friend Jason,
yes.
our friend Jason has spent time with him. He would know how to pronounce it correctly. But, but yeah, because he was on The Walking Dead and Game Night and a million other things. He always plays like the evil scumbag character. Like that's just what he does. And so...
He does it so well.
Yeah. So I wasn't sad when his character died. But of course,
No.
I knew as soon as you see him sitting in that truck, he's like a character actor at this point. It's like, shit's going sideways. Like, I'm already ready for it.
The truck literally did go sideways.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely, like, very intense in that truck. And when it did go sideways and everyone went flying out,
mm-hmm.
I mean, just some of those little things, like people flying out of the truck, and it was just so intense.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see, John fighting for his bracelet,
mm-hmm.
which he probably didn't even really need anymore.
I think he was holding on to it just on the off chance that if it came back down to needing that bracelet to be with his family again, he was not going to let go of that opportunity.
He was not going to let go of it. And so he fought for it and ultimately won, but he took a life, and that you can
mm-hmm.
tell that affected him greatly.
Yeah.
There was a point later when he broke into a house and was watching TV. And he turned the TV off and he looked at himself and he saw the blood all over his face. And he went and washed it all off.
Yeah.
You could tell that he was really affected by having to make that decision.
Yeah.
And you just connected with that. You fight for things in your life.
Yeah.
And he was fighting literally for his life because they would have killed him.
Mm-hmm. It continues that moral or ethical like battle of it, who he is as a person in that. So I love that you mentioned him being at that house with that TV, because that ties in right where my next note goes, where, after that, because he's having to, he's looking at this house, he's saying, there's this family with a baby, young kids, and they're not here right now. It's like, but I have to, again, put myself first to try to find my family. But he leaves a note behind, at least, where, he takes their car, he finds the keys and takes the car. And I did make note of the note that he left. It just says, my name is John Garrity. I took your car. If I survive, I promise I'll bring it back. Which, he can't really keep that promise at all anymore at this point. But
no.
But he had to do something to try to, again, it's balancing his humanity.
Yeah. And he did that throughout the entire movie. There was a point, too, when one of my favorite effects parts, which we'll talk about in a little bit, was watching the asteroids, the mini fragments fall to the earth.
Yeah.
And they pull off and they're in the truck and they're trying to get to a safe place. And he sees, I believe it was a man in a car.
Yeah.
And the car was going to blow up. It was catching fire. He went over, burned himself, physical harm to himself to try to save the man in the car.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, they're fighting hard to save themselves and save each other, but with the comet coming and all of the fragments, it just all kept going through my head the entire time. You save a life now, but they may die. It just, for me, it was refreshing to see humanity. Nothing is a guarantee, but at least give someone an opportunity to stay alive and fight.
Yes.
And I think that was a huge message in this film.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved that scene. And so he had to be the hero and save the person. And it's not like he doesn't have this hero complex. But again, it's that humanity raging in him where he has had to make some serious decisions, whether they're good or bad, and the spectrum of, with the way you look at it, where he's had to defend himself and fight for his family. So in this moment, he's like, we have to swing this pendulum the other way, and I cannot leave this person behind when I have a choice, when there is something that I could do. And yeah, he ends up burning himself pretty badly in the process, but I think it's worth it. And I put myself in that situation. It's like, I could only hope that I would be the same way, that I would make that same decision to go save that person.
Yeah. I think, too, he was affected because he had killed the man that had been trying to kill him and steal his bracelet. And I think after that, he just seemed more focused on helping people. I think he wanted to help people because there's a later point when they do get to Osgood and they do get on the plane. The pilot knew that it would be overweight, but he still took the family. When they get there and the plane crashes due to some of the fragments coming down, he's just yelling at everyone, we're about a mile away. We've got to run. We've got to run. And he's just yelling at everyone and getting them going and pushing them to go to safety. And he was not the ringleader or the organizer or the person to do these things. But I feel like he really evolved into this. He's a leader.
Yeah.
But I think he just showed more depth to being a caring human being and really trying to do whatever he could, not only to save his family, but to save everyone else that was there as well. And I just really appreciated that about him. And I liked the whole arc of his character. I just really connected with him.
Because he even, in that moment, that crash, he went back up to the cockpit to try to help and save the pilots. It became clear pretty quickly that there was nothing he could do. But it was because he was in that cockpit, he could see where the military plane was landing, where he knew that they were close by. So it's all these little things that add up. But a lot of it is because he chooses kind of this humanity side. And, you know, if you believe in some kind of cosmic karma kind of thing, it does kind of, you know, swing his direction where he does make these decisions and then things work out because, you know, he is a good person. And I think, you know, by the end, you're really glad that they have made it and they make it to the bunker because he's proven to be somebody who deserves that chance.
Absolutely. I agree. There was one point, though, I have to say, when they make it to the bunker and they're all huddled together and his life is flashing before his eyes, there was a moment there that I thought the movie was going to end with them all dying.
Yeah, there was a second where I was kind of wondering the same thing, where they're all huddled together and then it goes to the life flashing, which was just beautiful because it's after Nathan had even mentioned that. I was like, you know, my friend Teddy at school said that, you know, your life flashes before your eyes before you die, but why can't it flash before your eyes while you're still alive so you can remember the beautiful memories and the people that matter to you? Which is kind of cool then that, you know, they were still alive. That flashes before them, but they didn't die. They did live. Yeah. And
I thought it was over. I just, you know, I sat there. I feel like I held my breath and I was just waiting for the credits to come up thinking, oh my God, this is going to end.
I thought it might have ended that way. And I don't know how I would have felt about that. I think I still would have really enjoyed the film, but it would have been a much more somber ending, you know?
I know. I just wasn't sure too the whole way through. Like, are they all going to make it? Or is his wife and child going to make it? Or is he and his wife going to, you know, what was going to happen?
And there was a few moments where he was willing to sacrifice himself for them. And I wondered if they were going to actually do that. Yeah. To where if they were going to do that, it would have been that moment where they were going to get on that plane. Yeah. And find, you know, where he offers that. He says, well, take my wife and kid at least. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe if that would have happened, again, it would have been a much more somber and sad ending, but his arc still would have been amazing in that case. Yeah.
I was afraid that the pilot was just going to say, yes, we'll take your wife and child. But she stepped up and said, no, you need to take my husband too, and was just, you know, really adamant with that. And we were lucky. They were lucky. They were able to get on the plane and go to Greenland and to survive. Yeah. But I feel like, too, it's not just about survival. It's about being a human, like being a human being and who you are as a person. So I feel like there was more to it than just this is another disaster film. Yeah. And I appreciate that so much because I do love me a good disaster film. I do. All the destruction and craziness, I just enjoy or appreciate. It's not about enjoying. It's about appreciating some of the work that goes into to deconstructing locations. Mm-hmm. But I really enjoyed this movie a lot. So
yeah. Well, cool. Anything else that you've got on John?
No, I think we have covered everything. There was one point, though, and we didn't mention this, and this was when they received the initial information about going to Robin's Air Force Base or Robin's Air Base, they said that they could not bring anyone else with them. It could only be the three of them. And there was one really heart-wrenching point when one of their friends was trying to get the Garrity's to take their daughter Ellie, who happened to be a very close friend of Nathan's.
Yeah.
And that was so heart-wrenching. I couldn't even.
Yep, that was rough.
And I really was conflicted about it. But then I realized, John was right. It's better for her to be with her family because they were going to turn her away. And she would have been all alone.
Yeah.
And that would not have been good. I mean, no way.
Yeah. It's a tough call, but they made the right call. They had to. And,
yeah.
Yeah, like you said, in the end, it's better that family's together versus that he knew it was not going to work out. He knew how strict it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Even it was more strict than they even expected it to be because once they found out about Nathan's diabetes, they were thrown out too.
Yeah.
So
I still question that. That's one of the things I question. When you pre-selected them, I mean, how did they not know? I don't understand. Like that, I feel like they should have known when they were pre-selected that he was a diabetic.
Yeah.
And diabetes is pretty easily managed. Mm-hmm. So
it's just, I guess, would have been the case where they don't know how long they would have had to be under a bunker, and
true.
They don't know the kind of supplies that they would have, and
it's true.
Maybe insulin is something that they just don't have room for versus all the other things they have to keep on track of. It's, those tough decisions.
Well, they were able to manage it because at the end, we know that they made it, so.
Yeah. So apparently they had enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing I had about him, and we might circle back to it, I think is, he makes it to Dale's house. He makes it to Allison's dad's house before they do. But I'm glad that wasn't like a big issue, that Nathan and Allison showed up pretty soon after. And that was a beautiful moment where they were all reunited. But then immediately he's like, okay, we're all together, but we gotta go. And he has this plan for them.
I appreciated, though, the way Allison reacted to seeing her dad, because that's exactly, I could relate to that. That's how I would be. Mm-hmm. You do, as, a little girl, having your dad, they scare the boogeyman away. They take care of everything. And even when you get older, your dad is still, the monster slayer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she walks up to him, Daddy, and you could just see it. And I just felt it a lot when she did that, because you're a little girl at that point, so.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess with that, we can talk about Allison a little bit. So, sadly, I don't have anywhere near as many notes on her as I did John,
No, me neither. I wasn't sure how I felt about her in the beginning, because she kind of made me annoyed that she was not more on top of this party, that she made John go to the store so she could get ready. But he was trying to start the barbecue so they could have the food. I'm like, But then I warmed up to her, after that. Yeah. I realized just, she was a good mother and she was trying to protect her son. And it was interesting to see her returning to loving her husband, they're reconnecting with him, because that it had to be a difficult situation. We learn through John's conversation with Dale that he had cheated on her. Yeah. Basically. And so that's not an easy thing for a marriage to come back from. So it was really interesting to me that we see her go through. It's not even like she's going through a process of forgiveness. It's more like everything is secondary now that we're in this situation. Mm-hmm. And the most important thing for us is to survive. Yeah. And we can do that together. And this is a much bigger problem than our intramarital issues. Yeah.
Not that, adultery or whatever is ever really a good thing. Yeah, no. But, I think it means so much to him that, the line that she tells him as far as, I'm exactly where I need to be right now in this, that it puts things in perspective. Absolutely. But now that we're at the end of the world, there's nobody she'd rather be surviving and fighting with than her husband and son.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And she's got a lot that she has to deal with on her own without him in this movie, too.
Oh, my God.
I remember there at the air base that they originally show up at when they're getting turned away, because they could have just walked onto that plane and nobody would have said anything. But it was because she went back to that guard to ask, is my husband coming back? Where is he? And she lets it slip about the medicine and the pump. And you can see on her face the moment she realizes she fucked up. And, where she's like, I shouldn't have said anything. And she even tried to, oh, no, it's, you know what? It's not even a big deal. He'll be fine. But the damage had already been done. And she's now having to talk to like this captain who, at that point, I wrote down in my notes, I said, Allison has a lot more patience and self-control than I do. And a lot of, it's like, and I know a lot of it's because Nathan is there with her and she has to put him first. But I was like, I feel like if it were me in that situation, the most vulgar of words and fists would probably already been flying around on several different people at that point.
Absolutely. She did have this conversation with Major Breen, who was the lady that basically said, no, I'm sorry, we can't let you on the plane. And she makes the comment, what if this was your family? And it was then that Allison, I think, really realized how dire the situation was.
Yeah.
Because the major said to her, 99% of armed forces families were not selected.
Yeah.
They were there voluntarily, knowing, I mean, they had to know how bad the situation was and that they were not going to survive.
Yeah.
And yet, Allison's there trying to fight for the opportunity, the chance for her and Nathan and her husband to survive. And I think you could see on her face that she was taking it in and realized that, wow, I'm fighting for my life while these people are just doing this. They're here voluntarily to do a job.
Sobering moment for sure.
Yeah, I thought so. There were so many in this movie.
Yeah.
So many moments like that.
She gets the really scary moment then of having Nathan taken from her.
Oh my gosh.
Even though it's like under this, I don't want to say guise, because I feel like the Vento family, Ralph and Judy, they, at least Ralph, it was him that started it, had the best of intentions, but it was such an off-the-wall and insane thing. And, I mean, there was a lot of selfishness on their part in there, too.
Yeah, they wanted to save themselves. He wanted to save him and his wife.
Yeah.
Although I have to tell you that at one point, I thought he was going to throw his wife out of the car and keep Allison, because she had the bracelet on.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't know. How much does he love his wife? Right.
Yeah, he was an interesting character there. But yeah, like her going through that, and then, so that's another one of those like emotional moments where I knew was hoped with all hope, and I figured, there was going to be that payoff when she finally does reach that base and, was going through like the FEMA tents where they had taken different people, and she finally finds Nathan in that moment. That was probably one of the biggest just like emotional moments and tearjerkers for me, was especially the nurse talking and telling her, like how brave Nathan had been. And he'd already informed them about his pump and he needed his insulin, and they had given him a refill and checked him. And like, it seems very heartless, a lot of these things that the military is doing. They're turning people away. But they don't have a choice. It's one of those really hard things where like you have to do that job, because if you are lenient with anybody, then the whole system crumbles.
Absolutely. And they were there voluntarily. I mean, knowing their own demise was imminent, they were still there volunteering. Yeah. I loved that medical professional, the way that she handled the discussion with Allison.
She gives Allison like a whole week's worth of stuff to take with them, and it was a really beautiful moment.
It really was. There was so much compassion. Like you could see, see on her face the compassion, and then you would see on Allison's face the fact that she was registering that after all of this madness, someone was actually being caring towards her and her son. And I think that she broke down a little bit at that moment, because she just was like, I can have faith in humanity because there are good people still left. Yeah. Not everyone is out to get me. And I appreciated that so much. That was a scene that I think one of my favorite scenes.
Yes.
In the movie.
All right. You have anything else on Allison?
The one thing that I did question about her is thinking about parents and the friends that I have that are parents, and knowing how many times they check things, because their kids are always leaving things behind, or stuff falls on the floor, or disappears under the seat of the car, never to be seen again. I questioned at first, why didn't Allison check the bag just to be sure that the cartridges were in there? But then I also remembered they were super confused, and I also know parents who fly by the seat of their pants.
Yeah, they're dealing with a lot right now.
Dealing with a lot. And so I know that these things happen.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was a plot point and a catalyst to drive the story forward.
Yeah. I think that slides really well right into the next character I've got here on the list, which is...
Oh, goodness.
Nathan.
I have to tell you, I don't have a ton of notes. I just have a ton of how amazing Roger Dale Floyd is.
I love that kid so much. And I've just only seen him in like 3 things now. And I'm like, he's blowing my mind.
Oh my gosh. We had just seen him. I saw him first as he played young Danny Torrance in Dr. Sleep.
Yes.
And then just a little while ago, I saw him as the young Elton in the spinoff for Walking Dead, and it's called World Beyond. Yes. And that I was super impressed. Like the way that he was conveying everything. Yeah,
he played a younger version of a character in flashbacks for those who have not watched that show. Yes. But like he stole that episode.
Yes, he did.
Like he was the highlight of that episode. A lot of people, because we have friends, the Walking Dead cast, Jason and Lucy, who talk about these Walking Dead shows. And they were even like, best part of this episode was the little kid that played the young Elton in those flashbacks. Like he stole the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And so it's a lot.
Just partway through watching the movie, it's just like, oh my God, this kid he's just amazing. Yeah. I loved the way that he was conveying emotions, like from the joy to the fear to the terror to relief to everything. And he just, it all seems so genuine to me. And I really can't wait to see what this kid does next because he's so talented.
Incredible.
So talented.
Yeah, I've got some notes on the character, so we can talk about Roger Floyd all day. No, but yeah, I've got a lot of like little notes. Of course, a lot of it we've covered just through other stories. We were talking through the other characters, his parents. But as they're packing their bags for the shelter, and like we don't even know where we're going, we don't even know what we need. But of course, obviously, the most important thing for him is they have to make sure that they have his insulin. Yes. And so they're like, well, they pack like, do we need a week's worth? Do we need a month's worth? Do we need years? Like, we don't know what we need. So they're just doing the best that they can. And of course, that becomes kind of that story point. As you mentioned, he's scared. And so he's got his blanket in his bag and he pulls that out to comfort himself. And with that, he knocks the insulin out of the bag, falls between the seats. And I immediately was like, well, that's going to come back. Yep. Obviously, that's a big issue. But then, you mentioned somehow like the government and the military are not aware of his condition. And, I guess they wouldn't have the resources to care for him. They wouldn't have for whatever reason, they're just going to turn him away, which I was like, this freaking sucks.
Yes.
Like,
and they've done it again because we get told by the man on the plane who says that his sister's child was turned away. And I'm just thinking, who wants that job? I can't imagine.
Yeah. And so much, this poor kid has gone through a lot in this movie. I mean,
2 days.
Even like being kidnapped from his mom, having these, random strangers kick his mom out of the car and take off her bracelet and leave her on the side of the road and then take off with him to pass him off. And David Denman did such an incredible job.
He really did.
As Ralph, I love him he's Roy from The Office. I'm a huge Office fan. So, and it was kind of Roy. I was like, this could be what Roy does, like where he could be pretty evil at certain times, like with the best intention, quote unquote. But and that's kind of what it was he wants to get him and his wife on one of these planes, and he really does have the intention. He wants to save this kid too.
Yes.
But even though Allison had told them like they wouldn't let him on because of his diabetes. So I don't know what they're expecting to be different because they're with him now. I
wondered that too.
But they do a good job, I guess, for what they're trying to do of playing it off of, this is my son and my wife and I'm John Garrity and somebody stole my bracelet, trying to play it off. But that's what I loved about Nathan there was him making that decision to be so brave.
Yes.
Because he would have been taken from his parents and never would have seen them again. If it wasn't for the fact that he told that soldier, these are not my parents. They took my mother's bracelet and left her behind. And the soldier believed him. And
yes. And that compassionate moment when the soldier picks him up and says, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That just killed me. I'm just like, oh my gosh. That moment in all the madness and all of the difficult decisions to keep people off planes because of diabetes and all of this, that soldier just was human.
Yeah.
And I just appreciated that so much. It's just another instance of that. The human moments in this film really stick with me because it was a lot of madness. And I really appreciated those little moments like that.
Yeah. And then I've got notes on just other smaller characters that we see throughout the movie. I don't know, do you have anything else to say about Nathan or?
Just, we touched on this briefly, just that those conversations between Nathan and John at the beginning and most of the way through the movie, I really felt like they felt authentic.
Yeah.
And they weren't forced. I liked that a lot. I liked that they seemed realistic.
Yeah. It's a powerhouse cast that really did very well.
They did.
Making you care for them and their relationships.
Yes. Without a lot of backstory. I mean, we really didn't have a lot to go on other than you just met this family and you don't know why because you don't know anything about them, but you care about them. Mm-hmm. That says a lot for the acting.
Yeah. And so I think the one that's probably the biggest example of that is the next one I'm going to bring up, which is Scott Glenn as Dale, Allison's father. Even though he was only there for a short period of time, he may have been the one that impacted me the deepest. It was just one of those, he chooses to stay behind. Somebody's got to take care of this place. He had already lost his wife. It seems, I don't know how long it had been, but, even after her passing, he tended to her horse and her barn and finished the remodels on the house. And, he was just he seemed to be like a very caring, loving husband.
Yes.
And father. And he was and he said, he kind of has, a religious kind of tone to him. He must be, where he was just like, your mother went to heaven right here in this home. And so when my time comes, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to, and he was very set on that. And I think that's very admirable. And I could understand. It's sad.
Yeah.
But I get it.
He was it's so endearing. I love that he spent so much time in the barn because that was the place that his wife had spent so much time.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be close to her. And I loved when he was talking about he couldn't separate the memories of his wife from the smell in the barn of the hay and the shit.
Yeah.
And I actually liked that because I just thought, when you're connected to someone like that and you lose them and you go and spend your time where they would spend time.
Yeah.
That is how it should be,
Yeah, it was beautiful. And then when they're getting in the truck to leave, take off and that last moment where he's, hugging and talking to them and Allison's kind of breakdown as she gets into the car, leaving her father behind was rough. But that last interaction he has with Nathan just really, my heart was so just like, because he was like, am I going to see you again? And he's like, well, maybe. And he's kind of joking, he just kind of jokes with the kid. But he was like, yeah, when all this stuff blows over, I'll travel up to wherever you are and I'll come visit you in the polar bears. And he's like, what about the polar bears? Like, you're going to the North Pole, right? Tell Santa hi for me, but I'm still mad about the coal. He's got this, and he knows this way to make Nathan smile. And it's a good way to that's the last memories they're going to have of him.
Yes.
And he makes it as best as he can. And I just wrote in my notes, I said, well, great. Scott Glenn just shattered what was left of my heart. So
I had a feeling when I was watching this movie, there were parts in it. I just kept thinking Pake is really going to have a hard time with this part. Because I was having a hard time with it as well. So I knew that you would. Yeah. I knew that you would. I knew that your heart was going to be, your heartstrings are going to be tugged on for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. Let's see. Any other characters? I just have a couple little notes. We talked about the Vento, David Denman, and I didn't get the actress's name.
Hope Davis.
Judy. Hope Davis,
name.
Yes.
Yep, and she's been in a bunch of things. I remember her most recently because she was in a little show called Wayward Pines, which was only a couple of seasons, but she had quite a role on that one.
Cool.
And I remember her, she was in the store when Allison and Nathan were in the store, which was really terrifying. They go in to find insulin and people come in and it's not just the looting, it's people coming in and actually shooting other people. Yeah.
It was almost this apocalyptic scenario where people had just decided they're going to kill and they're going to loot. They're not going to let other people come in and loot the store. They're going to take everything for themselves. It's like they're almost setting up for a zombie apocalypse situation where they own all the goods now, not thinking about the whole world's going to be gone. It doesn't matter.
That TV is not going to help you.
Yeah. But they're in that situation well, we own all the stuff. We have the power and we,
Yeah.
And you can see that's like the bad side of humanity. Like when things like this happen, is there's people who are going to do the best to take advantage of it for their own personal gain.
Absolutely. Yeah. You get to see the best and the worst and the in-between. Because I feel like there was a little in-between. And I was really grateful that that one guy that was with the group that was shooting everyone, Allison was able to, to prey on his humanity enough that he said, get out, just go. I appreciated that a lot.
Definitely. Let's see. Yeah, the neighbors, I didn't have a whole lot. Yeah, I mentioned just how heartbreaking that was. And I understand like the fear and anger that they had.
Yeah.
It's not the Garrity's choice. I mean, the alert says no exceptions, and they know, like you mentioned, John says, what would it be better for us to take Ellie, for them to turn her away, and now she's left all alone at the gate? Like, that's not going to be better. But I can totally understand why all of these neighbors would be so frustrated. Like, why did they get to go and we don't? And that's tough. And then, I mentioned again the truck. We talked about him, Joshua Michael, his character's evilness, and then Colin, which I was so sad.
Colin. I liked Colin.
King Batch. Andrew Batchelor is incredible. I know him mostly. He's King Batch, which is Vine, back when Vine was a thing. And then I don't do TikTok, so I'm sure he does stuff on there too, but I don't follow that, so I don't know. But, I know Vine and YouTube and stuff. He's, a comedian and social media guy. And he's really funny, and has done a lot of fun videos. But he's really, in the past year or so, started really diving into his acting career. He was on The Walking Dead for an episode. Yeah. He has popped up in a couple other movies that I've seen recently, and then he had a really cool role in this one, even though it was short. But he's padding that resume and really making a name for himself as a serious actor. And I love that, because I really hope to see more of him in future movies and TV and stuff, because I always thought he was a really funny guy on Vine, but he's got some incredible acting chops, and I love seeing him on screen.
Yeah, I want to see more. More of a role, not just this small, this small, but very significant piece of the puzzle that we had in this movie. I want to see more, him have a bigger part in another production, so that we can really see what he's able to do. Because I never watched him on Vine, but I do remember when we were first discussing this movie, you had brought it up to me that he was in it.
Yeah, I had just some other cast stuff. I mean, just talking about the actors and actresses themselves. It says good for Gerard Butler to finally not have to fake an accent and just use his Scottish accent for this movie.
In all its glory.
Yeah, it was good. And then, I had notes about, Roger Dale Floyd that played Nathan. Again, we talked about that, the other roles that we've seen him in and how good he is. But then, Gerard Butler's always a treat. Law Abiding Citizen's one of my favorite movies. I think I mentioned that to you. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not seen it.
So good.
I'll have to check it out.
Marina Baccarin is awesome in Gotham and the Deadpool movies.
Yes.
And so
I remember her from the short-lived V series where she played Anna, which was the Visitor's queen, basically. Yeah. She was pretty amazing on that. She just had her character had this even-keeled demeanor most of the time. Yeah. And it was just how do you keep it together the whole time and not lose it? But she did. It was just like this the whole time.
Scott Glenn, I did mention, which I know him mostly, but my kind of nerdy side. But I mean, to me, it's he's Stick from Daredevil.
Absolutely.
And Alan Pangborn from Castle Rock. And Jack Crawford from Silence of the Lambs.
I know. Oh my gosh. Back in the day.
And now Dale from Greenland.
Yes. Now Dale from Greenland.
And then one other note that I had on that cast stuff was, it must have been did they use, does Roger Dale Floyd have a even younger, little brother that they used for those flashback scenes? I couldn't find anything on it. I looked at it, but I was it has to be, because it looked just like him.
Yes. I wondered if they use some digital software to age him down or something. I don't know.
I don't know if they could do it that well with a kid.
Close.
So I really think that must have been, I couldn't find anything about it, but it must have been a little brother or something. Yeah. But
I think so too.
And then one more thing before I guess we get into the main quote unquote antagonist of this movie, the comet itself, but character wise, I just want to talk a little bit about the military themselves as a character. The presidential alert thing, I had to know, is that an actual thing? I was I know presidential alerts are, and they can make them specific to regions.
Yes.
and areas. But I was like, but can they like send it out that specifically to like a certain person? And they're through their phones and smart TVs and stuff. I was like, probably, knowing the intelligence, in technology our government and stuff has. I'm sure that's absolutely a thing, but I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, me neither.
But of course, if they did have that kind of technology to do that with specific people who've been, selected individually for highly classified things, I guess we never would know about that.
No, I don't think that I'm privy to being on that list. Maybe you are, but I'm not really privy to that.
Yeah, but these military going through, these gates, all these people trying to get into these planes that they don't have, they haven't been selected. They don't have wristbands. They're not on the list. And just how intense that is for them to have to deal with that.
Yeah, because it's not their fault. They didn't make the list.
Mm-hmm.
They're only trying to keep the peace so that people that were selected can get on the planes and things don't get out of control.
Yeah.
And so you had to feel for them in that situation because it could not have been pleasant.
Yeah.
I mean, to have to make a decision and take a child who has diabetes and basically give him a death sentence by saying, no, you can't get on the plane. That cannot be a job you have to be super tough for that. So
I guess it's, a good, not coincidence. What's the word I'm looking for? But, it's a nice break for them. Finally, at the end, at least the military that was there at the base in Greenland took them in after they made this entire, trip over there. Because how terrible would that have been to be like, but you're still not on the list, so bye.
I know. It's not like you're at a club downtown and you're not on the guest list, you can't get in. This is like life and death decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So at least at that moment where they see like, oh, it's happening within an hour, like in a minute and a half, like get in,
gosh.
and it's...
They're counting down and everyone's running downstairs and into tunnels and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Man.
I can't breathe.
Yeah, and then we find out at the end, that they were underground for 9 months.
Yep.
And that's how long it took until like ash and things cleared up enough for them to be able to safely open the doors. We find out the base in Greenland is just one of several spread out all across the world. And so there's a lot of different survivors in different places, and they all have communication with each other.
And the birds really survived.
Cool. And we see those few birds, which means there's a sign of life outside and it's safe to go out. And like, it's a good sign. John sees it as like, there's still like, we can return to life and there's chance for regrowth and rebirth here, which is cool.
It made me go to a biblical place and I actually thought of Noah's Ark.
Yeah, the dove.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. That was kind of symbolic to me in a way.
There was quite a bit of like religious symbolism sprinkled in throughout this movie.
Yeah.
Because even like they're listening to like a radio broadcast of somebody who's, my thoughts and prayers are with everyone out there. But then she's quoting Revelations about, the, death and destruction. The stars will fall from the sky, and they called it wormwood. And they had this whole,
It's like, I don't want to relive that. Let's not. I remember that. I remember that at Sunday school. I don't want to go to It's scary.
But yeah. Any other notes that aren't specifically comment related?
No, actually. Oh, wait. Cool, you know what? There were a few things, and I might as well bring them up now, just because I think that once we get to the comment, it's going to be all comment all the time.
Yeah.
So, I questioned a few of these things already. The thing about John being pre-selected reminded me a bit of Deep Impact, and when the Biedermans were pre-selected due to Leo discovering the comet. So I felt like that was more believable than maybe this. I'm still a little iffy on the pre-selected. I know he's an architect. There are so many architects.
Yeah.
So I kind of questioned.
What made him special?
What made him special? What did you do? And we didn't know because they didn't show us. So I didn't know. I questioned too, and I mentioned this already. How did the government not know that Nathan was diabetic? Like, I didn't understand that.
It's like they put everything into John and didn't research his family deep enough. Like the immediate family they knew he was taking with him.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like to me like they did enough deep digging on anyone because another family was turned away too. Allison being able to find her son after he was taken, I was kind of like, I don't know about that.
I mean, she knew where they were taking him to.
So that helped.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't my that wasn't one of my big questions. And these were all questions kind of that came up after the movie, because while I was watching it, I was so focused and so entranced that I wasn't asking these questions during. And the last thing was stopping the plane by driving on the runway. I get why they did it, and I think it was effective. I'm still just not sure I'm not sure about it, and I'm not sure why I'm not sure about it, but it's just something that I'm like, I don't know. I mean, they could have been killed, actually. So I don't know. But I get why they did it, and I totally am fine with it. It didn't take away from the movie. These are just a few things that were on my mind after I watched it, and I didn't want to lose sight of them.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Let's jump into Clark.
Oh, Clark. Comet. Fragments. The asteroid. Oh my gosh. It wasn't like any other one that I had seen in a movie. I mean, I've seen a lot of movies about end of life events. However, this one was even more unpredictable, I guess, at times.
Yeah.
And I felt like we learned a lot from Nathan, because he was talking about his teacher, Mr. Williams. He was telling his dad that, well, Mr. Williams said it's like a large snowball made of gas, and Clark is a comet. It's not an asteroid. Comets move way faster. And because Clark is from another solar system, that's why the scientists don't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
I feel like we learned little things throughout the movie based on like what newscasters and others were saying. Because one of the newscasters said that unlike most of the comets or asteroids, which move much slower and are easier to track, this particular comet was not a singular body. It was like hundreds of pieces of rock and ice that had broken up over millions of years. And the fragment trail was so long that the astronomers couldn't see the end of it.
Yep.
So
they're expecting it to just be a close pass by of Earth, which has happened before.
Yes.
You know, that's what they were building up to. Is like, we'll see it. You know, it's big enough to where we'll see it as it passes by, and it'll be a visual, spectacular thing, and it'll look really cool up in space.
Yes.
And then it kind of gets a little worse, and like, okay, so some of the fragments are going to get into our atmosphere, but don't worry, they'll burn up before they actually hit the ground, and it'll be even cooler to see. And then it gets worse, where they're like, okay, it's gonna land like off the coast of Bermuda. It's gonna be out in the middle of the water, and everything's gonna be fine.
Until it did.
And then immediately jumps from there to Tampa's not just destroyed, but gone.
Yeah, and we saw that. I mean, they showed us a piece of the meteor hitting Tampa and annihilating the city, and the chopper that took the video obviously did not.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't even have time to turn away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was felt in Atlanta. And I think Nathan actually looked up and told his dad that the sky was on fire at one point. And then their neighbor Ed actually tells them that it was a cluster of the fragments that were going to actually hit the Earth. And it was an extinction. And it was an extinction level event. And it was going to happen over
once
the next 48
biggest
hours.
piece hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, the comet ended up being a much bigger deal than the news had built it up to. But just a lot of the views we see, like throughout the whole movie, just like you see in the sky behind them, just these like streaks of the particles that have moved through, and you see the light, and it's almost like this like aurora effect. And
it was incredible to look at.
Definitely.
It was.
I get that group of people having just like an end of the world party on that one rooftop, whatever. I was like, no, I totally dig that. I'd be probably right there with them. Once I realized like, oh, there's no hope for me, and there's nowhere I can go, might as well drink and hang out with a bunch of people while the world explodes.
Yeah, exactly. You want at least for the end of your life to be something you celebrate, and just hanging out with your friends and singing and being completely blitzed. That sounds like the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we learned, too, that the large fragment that's going to cause this big event is like 9 miles wide and is scheduled to hit Western Europe or Northern Africa, like in that area. Yeah. And so that just made it, I mean, the situation was dire, so they had to get to Greenland however they could get there. Because the world was going to basically be on fire. I mean, the way that they talked about things, it just was just dire. You knew that it was going to be over.
Yep.
And so they were very lucky. They make it to the bunker. And then some of the scenes, like the 9 months later scenes of different cities and the wreckage, like the Eiffel Tower, and just demolished.
They left New York out of it.
They did.
So again, that's going to become a thing on this podcast. It's like, finally, New York gets a break again.
Yes, because it doesn't happen very often. New York and the Statue of Liberty are almost always.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it didn't get a break. It's also just like all those other ones. But at least we didn't have to see it because we know. We know.
We didn't have to see it. I'm totally down with that. So I liked also the orbital view that we saw above the Earth of the giant European crater and then the smaller craters throughout the globe.
Yeah.
The visuals, and I tried to find information, could not find any info on who did some of this stuff. But it was pretty incredible. I thought the effects were great. And the visuals.
Very good.
Yeah.
There's only one visual I had a problem with, and that was when John is pulling the guy out of the burning car and the fire does not look very real. Like on the door he's reaching through. I was like, okay, there's a little bit of iffy CGI there. I'll forgive it though.
Yeah.
Like, because they did such a great job on everything else.
Yeah.
Which that's a scene we haven't. Yeah. We haven't really talked about the comet version of that scene. We talked about him saving that guy, but part of the comet kind of thing was that moment where it's like molten debris falling from the sky, where it's like all these little fragments and pieces that they were just showering over upstate New York where they were at that time.
It was a beautiful meteor shower, but it was deadly.
Man. Yeah. I was like, because things weren't bad enough. So that's exactly what they need now is just little tiny meteors falling all over the place.
When they're on a time crunch.
Yeah. Just from a visual standpoint, I'm sitting there the whole time going, I hope they show it a hit. Not just a car. I was like, I want to see one hit a person. I was like, I know that's so morbid and terrible, but like from a visual standpoint, a person who loves like horror and disaster movies and stuff, to be like, you just have to show that when you have that opportunity. And they did, but it wasn't like over the top gory or anything, which was good. I'm glad that it was more kind of like a stunt person kind of thing where it hit them slightly to where like you just get like that stunt man on fire flailing and then falling to the ground. And I was like, okay, cool. They did it, but like it wasn't gratuitous.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely appreciated that. I thought it was, the effects were great.
Definitely. Yeah, of course, one more shockwave that crashes the plane because these people can't catch a break. No, so of course you gotta do that one more time, and then you see the extinction level like piece going over them, heading towards where it's gonna land, and they can see it,
and it's minutes
in the atmosphere.
Like you have minutes, to make it. They ran their little legs off to get there and then get inside. But
it was great. It was great. I enjoyed it. Any other notes on that yourself?
No, I think we have covered everything that I had in my notes.
Oh, man. Awesome. Well, then, all right. So, Daphne, you got a little bit of production notes to cover?
Just a couple things. It's a newer film. So, what I found in films like this, there's very little that's out there. I guess people haven't dug it up yet. And I didn't go dig it up so this is what I was able to find. So this was the 7th film directed by Ric Roman Waugh. He has worked with Gerard Butler on a little film called Angel Has Fallen. And he's going to direct the upcoming Night Has Fallen, which is the 4th movie in that whole Has Fallen Mike Banning quadrilogy. Originally, South African director Neil Blomkamp was slated to direct the film with Chris Evans in the leading role, but both exited the movie as of February 2019. And as we talked about earlier, box office results during the COVID-19 pandemic are a bit tricky to figure out. So what equals success is still up for discussion, debate, and determination.
Yeah. There's one other little production thing that I saw while compiling my notes that is just kind of like a little interesting little thing, because it's not necessarily confirmed, but it seems pretty sure. The can't call it asteroid. Nathan would be mad at me. Now, the comet is named Clark, and it's most likely a nod to Arthur C. Clarke, who set up the plot in his 1973 novel Rendezvous with Rama. He describes an asteroid strike in 2077 that destroys much of northern Italy.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I thought that was kind of cool.
That is cool. Thanks for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm. All right, what do we have for quotes?
I have 2 sets of quotes. I did not write a lot down because I just felt like, while there were things that were quotable, I felt like for the most part, I wanted to leave it alone. And so the ones that I came up with were when John questions Nathan about how school is going. John says, "Are your teachers talking about this thing?" Nathan says, "Yeah, Mr. Williams said Clark is like a big snowball made of gas." John says, "Wow, asteroids made of farts." And then Nathan corrects him and says, "No, Clark is a comet." And then Nathan corrects him and says, "No, Clark is a comet, silly, not an asteroid." And then later on, when Nathan is looking up at the sky, looking for the comet, he says, "I don't see Clark." And John says, "Well, maybe he's sleeping." And then Nathan just responds with, "Dad." Those were just 2 of the very few moments of levity, because this movie just did not have the funny. It was so intense and serious all the time that there just wasn't any funny. Yeah.
My quotes are usually the funny moments, and I didn't have really any, which sometimes that's okay. Yeah. Like, sometimes it's good to just go into a movie and just it be bleak and depressing and dark and tense, and that's fine. So the ones that I do have are just stuff that kind of stuck out to me. You mentioned one earlier, but it's Nathan just walking outside with "the sky's on fire," which is scary.
Pretty intense.
And then I have 2 that are voices that we hear that aren't any character that we know. One on the radio that says, "Before the inevitable collapse of our nation," while I'm in the car. And that was just like a worrisome line that you can even see Allison just react to that line like, oh God. And then a voice on TV while John is in that other house where he takes the car from, where the person follows up what they're talking about, people helping each other and doing this and that. And he says, "But tomorrow it's all going to be for nothing."
Ugh,
and that was just really hard hitting. Yeah.
So bleak.
I have John's line where he's in the barn with Dale and tells him, "Dale, this isn't some storm you can just ride out," which was another one of those just like lines that was pretty heavy. It was like, oof, the realization, I mean, you're going to die here. Yeah. But the last one that I have, which was a little bit more levity, but not super, but they're driving and Allison is just switching radio station to radio station. It's all news and it's all broadcasts and finally they hit one where there's music playing.
Yeah.
And she says, "Finally." And John goes, "At least they're going down with the band still playing," which I thought was nice.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Is that all you got?
That's all I got.
This movie, it really wasn't about what's quotable. It was more about feelings and intensity and effects and the family, and it wasn't about quotes. So I feel like we pulled out some nuggets out of the dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't have this one in my notes, but it follows up right there after the band's still playing line, and then Allison kind of cracks up, and then you see she's remembering something. So, "Remember the first time you met my mom?" It's like she wore a kilt. It's like she wanted to make you feel at home, and there's this whole like back and forth with that, and I thought that was cute.
Yeah, I remember that. I liked that a lot. That was it was one of those endearing things where you just connected with them, and it made them more human and more realistic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Every couple knows what it's like to go through meeting the in-laws, and it can be it can be good or it can be a little awkward. And so I think it was cool to hear them telling a story that was a little awkward and humorous.
Yeah. Yeah, Allison's mom wanted to make him feel at home. He was originally from Scotland.
Yeah.
Which, again, there was a kind of sinister turn on that, too, that I remembered when he's talking to Josh Michael's character.
Oh, yeah.
Where he hears his Scottish accent, says, "Where are you from?" He says, "Atlanta." "No, where are you originally from?" And he's like, "Why does that matter?" He's like, "Because you don't belong. You shouldn't be on one of those planes." Kind of this whole, you're not a real American.
Oh,
you don't,
goodness.
this whole, there's this dark little twist there. I was like, oh, man, this guy is terrible. All right, so I think the last thing to do is find out where Greenland lands on our rankings.
I think that it's that time in the podcast when we do that.
All right. Of course, as always, I'm going to let you go first.
Of course you are. Yes. It's become customary for me to have to lay it out first. Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm just going to lay it out there. It's one that I've actually watched 2 times because I wanted to make sure to have thorough notes. And I didn't mind the second watch, and I noticed things in it the second time that I didn't notice the first time, which was cool. At the end of the day, I think it's a great watch, and I think you have to be in the right frame of mind to watch it, though, because it is quite intense, and it is something that puts you in a position where you're focused for the full 119 minutes. So at the end of the day, I gave it an 8.75.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And now it's your turn.
Yeah, not quite that high on it, but it's weird because, again, when we watch these movies, I'm trying to compare them to other movies that fit kind of in that genre. Yeah. So as I'm doing my ranking, I'm comparing it against Dante's Peak and The Day After Tomorrow and Twister even. So I didn't go quite that high, but same letter grade in a way because I gave it just a flat 8.
Ooh, that's not bad. That's cool. Yeah. I'm a fan of Dante's Peak and Day After Tomorrow, but I really like this one. I think this is one that I could revisit.
Yeah, I think the 8 is still higher because I think both of those movies were in the 7 range for me. So it's higher. I liked it more than those. And again, it comes again comparatively because it's a newer movie that just came out. Yeah. So the acting is going to be better. The effects are going to be better.
I think being starved for new movies, maybe that's a bonus.
It's good to actually watch something brand new.
Again, this is one that neither of us had seen, so it's cool to be able to mix this up, and sometimes one of us has seen it and not the other, or both of us haven't seen it, or we have seen it. I like being able to switch things up like that.
Yes. Awesome. All right, it's time to get into some feedback for this week, and we have a good little bit of written in feedback. No voicemails this week, but that's okay. We take what we get, and we appreciate you all just the same. So,
we definitely do. And we have actually some feedback from some folks who have not sent us feedback before. So I'm really excited to get to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, let's start off. Of course, there's a couple of comments going back to last week when we covered Krampus.
Yes.
Some feedback, yes, from some of those as well. So that's great. I'll go ahead and get into the first one. First one comes again from our friend Damien, who says, "This is evidence why listening to movie podcasts can be helpful. After Pake talked about the other way of interpreting the ending, I liked this movie a lot more. Instead of eternity in a snow globe, I'm going to think that Krampus is just watching and that Max and the fam stay off the naughty list."
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so glad, because that's kind of what I did too. Pake uncovered that. It just made things seem a bit more hopeful than it did originally to me, because I thought it was super dreary ending, but I am choosing to believe what you found out, Pake, and that's what we're going with. Sounds like Damien feels more hopeful too.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So our friend Jamie actually just left a very brief comment. She basically said, "Great episode," so I thought that was really nice. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, short and sweet.
We appreciate that.
We'll take it.
And then Tony left a comment on Twitter and said that she watched Krampus on Christmas night. A great way to end the day, I thought anyway. "I was happy to find that you covered it. My favorite part was the gingerbread men, and I loved the aunt. She was all bark and no bite." I loved that when Tony left her comment, she left this cool gif of the gingerbread man with the broken candy cane coming at Howard just loved it. I thought it was
Nice.
amazing. So thank you, Tony, for reaching out to us on Twitter.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then we do have a couple of comments about this week with Greenland. And so I'll get into this first one. This first one comes from our good friend Anwen from the beautiful island country of New Zealand. Last time I think we heard from her was back in Black Sheep. And
yes,
I'm so glad that she get back to us again on this one. She says, I was expecting a blockbuster asteroid movie, but was very surprised to see such a gritty, harrowing portrayal of a family desperately trying to survive and stay together. It seemed exactly like what would actually happen in that situation. Most harrowing parts were when the mom and son were separated, and the scene with the hammer. Enjoyed it, but in a different way than I expected. Also, I got to see this in the theater, which made it even more intense. Yeah, lucky that movie theaters, remember those things?
Yes. I'm so jealous of you, Anwen, but I'm so glad that you were able to get out and get that theater experience.
Yeah.
After watching this movie, as you can tell if you listen to this podcast, I really enjoyed it, and I only can wonder what it would be like if we had gotten to see it on the big screen. Because I think it could have even been more impactful, but I loved it anyway.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of fun.
Well, Kelly actually writes in and says, disaster movies are probably my favorite genre. I can never pass one up. I enjoyed this, though thought it was done well. But at the same time, I didn't really feel like it was anything that hasn't been done before. The technology was updated and showed some of the not so good parts of humanity. Thinking about it, they maybe did spend more time on character development than some of the other ones out there. But then it maybe had a little less action. I did enjoy it. Overall, I'd say it's a fairly solid disaster flick.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, I agree that it's not... I mean, there's some pretty, hectic and chaotic moments throughout this film for sure. But it isn't, constant, go, 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 action, disaster, craziness. They do spend some time to really make you, feel and care for the characters, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I definitely did as well.
Cool. All right, that is it for feedback. So if you want to listen to some other podcasts and venture back out, into the wider world of podcasts around us and see where else you can hear us and our friends, of course, you can check out Strange Indeed. As always, I plug it every week, and I will continue to do so. As Rima and Ben mainly are covering The Stand on CBS All Access right now. And so episode 3 will be the next one that's coming up on. Episode 2, I was on. I'll be doing a few episodes throughout this season, so I'm excited for that. But it's just Rima and Ben covering episode 3, but still definitely go check it out because it's been a lot of fun to listen to and be a part of. And then over on Panels to Pixels, you have Mark and Steve. They are discussing Arch Enemy with Joe Manganiello, and that was released in December. So that is a newer one. So that is interesting.
It is.
They're getting some new stuff over on Panels, so go check that out.
Definitely.
And then Mark also with his other podcast, Adrenaline Cinema, where him and special guest Kat just covered the 2014 movie John Wick, starring Keanu Reeves, and I listened to that just recently, and it's a fun one. It's fun to listen to them geek out about that movie and break it down. It's a lot of fun.
It always is. I love that Mark has the rotating hosts, so you get him and a different guest every week, and it's really cool.
Yeah. And then as far as what else is coming up on podcasts, Daphne, why don't you tell everybody what's coming up next week on Run for Your Lives?
So next week, we are going to dive into Godzilla, the American monster film directed by Gareth Edwards and starring Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Bryan Cranston, and Elizabeth Olsen. It was released in theaters on May 16th, 2014. It's an interesting one for us. I'm looking forward to getting it out there and having everyone listen to it.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. And then I'll go ahead and tease it a little bit. I mean, it's probably going to kick up this, Godzilla Monsterverse kind of thing that they're doing. Well, we'll cover the rest of these movies leading up until Godzilla vs. Kong, whenever that eventually comes out. I think it's looking more towards streaming release at this point, but we'll see what they do with it.
Yes. They've said potentially in May.
Yeah.
So we have a few movies to cover before then.
Yeah. All right. So if you have any theories, feedback, thoughts, or anything else on Godzilla or Greenland or any other movies that we've covered, then of course you can always send us that feedback. We always appreciate it, either through Facebook at facebook.com/runforyourlivespodcast. You can email us, and you can also send your voicemails in that way through email, which is, I think, the best way to do that, and that is runforyourlivespodcast@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter, like Tony did, at our FYL Podcast, or on Instagram at Run For Your Lives Podcast. And if you're enjoying the show, please tell your friends, share the love, hit us up on Apple Podcasts and give us 5 stars and a review, and send everyone you know who would maybe enjoy this podcast to all of our social medias and podcast players. We're available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Audible, all of it. You can just go to runforyourlivespodcast.com to find links to all of our social media and podcast players.
That is correct. And with that, we've reached the end of our show. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I am Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And if you have to run from an unpredictable comet named Clark, you'd better run for your lives. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And bye-bye.